Okay, so once you're looking at your floor plan on your sheet, you can't make the assumption that Revit's done everything for you. Remember, it gets you reasonably close, but you can see here I've got more information than I need to show. On a main floor view like this, I don't need to have every layer of the wall showing. I'm printing at 1 to 150 on 11 by 17. So if I try to print this with line weights and such, it's just going to get really, really cluttered. So there's the thin lines turned off, and you can see that I've just got more in here than I need to show. So once you've got things lined up on your sheet and you're sure that you've got the right scale, then you should go back to the view, so back in the browser to main floor. And even though when we work, when we're generating the geometry, we want to have as much detail as possible, when it comes time to print, we probably need to reduce that a little bit. So the first thing that I would do is go to the detail level and switch it from fine to coarse. So what that'll do is just kind of reduce it to basic elements, and you can see here already I've just got, instead of a whole bunch of lines for each layer of the wall, I've just broken this down to just kind of inner and outer lines. So that's a pretty good, much better sort of graphic view of the walls there. As I kind of move around the drawing, I can see that that's going to do for the elevator shafts and exterior walls. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to deal with these kind of oversized column line weights. So I'll just zoom in on this spot here, and I'll shove it up to the left-hand corner so that as I make changes, you'll be able to see the difference. So it's too much line weight there. And to change that, I need to go to the Manage tab, and I'm going to go to the Object Styles tool. And this is the way that you set line weights for the entire project. So these are not view specific. This is how line weights will display throughout the project. And to adjust the line weights for the columns, I'm going to drop down to Structural Columns. And you can see here that the way this works is I have a line weight for projection and a line weight for cut. So if my view just showed something in the distance, that would be projection. I would have a nice light line weight of 1. And if I was actually cutting it, then I would have a heavier line weight, in this case 4. For structural columns, I'm going to drop down and actually change this setting here. So in plan view, when I'm slicing a column, I want to change the stick symbol line weight. It's set to 6. I'm going to change that to 3. And I'm going to click apply, and you should in the upper left-hand side there see the line weight get lighter. So there, it's a much more reasonable line weight for that column. These numbers here just refer to another table that I'll show you in a minute, and that's how you ultimately control what the sort of dimensions are on each of the line weights. So I'll click OK, and if I wanted to control exactly what that line weight was, on the same tab here, Manage, I would click on Additional Settings, select Line Weights, and I'd see here a list of scales along the top and then corresponding line weight values here. So when we were adjusting the 6 for the column, it was initially set to display with line weight 6, which is determined by these numbers for each of the scales. So because we had a custom scale of 1 to 150, it just goes up to the next value, which would have been 1 to 200. So this is initially what that column was set to print at, 0.5 millimeter. And we changed it back to 3, which would have been 0.18. So if you like, you can change your line weights here, and your lightest line weights, your number ones, you can drop them down to something lower, like let's say 0.05. And I'll do that for the 1 to 100 as well. And at that light line weight, it's hard to see the difference, but these lines here, for example, got a little bit lighter. So that's the next step in dealing with line weights. You can also, if you ever need to, if you've got individual objects and you just want to change them sort of per object, adjust their line weight, you can select individual objects, right-click, and go to Override Graphics in View by Element. And here you get some controls that would allow you to change the line weight for just that one object. This is not likely something that you'll ever need. Usually the graphic styles and the overall project line weights are good enough. So now I've reduced the detail on screen. This is going to print much more clearly, much more graphic. There are still a few things I could get rid of, like, for example, this line here for the floor. In a floor plan, I'm relying on the walls to show me where the building's perimeter is, of course, so I don't really need to show the floor objects. So there are objects that you can just turn off. I'll use my visibility graphic overrides to do this by typing in VG. And I'll just use the scroll bar on the right and drop down to floors, deselect that, click OK. And now you can see that I've lost that line there as well. Just to simplify this one step further, notice I've got the outer lines for my curtain wall panel here. I've got my curtain wall mullions. And I've got this line here as well, which I could leave out. I don't need to have that sort of lower projection face of the mullion below showing. I can get rid of that one of two ways. I could adjust my view range right here and set my view range to be really, really shallow so that it only shows a vertical mullion. To do that, I might leave my cut plane where it is at 1200. I might bring the bottom up to, let's say, 1150, and then I can bring my view depth up to 1100. And that should, yeah, take away that bottom line of the mullion here. So I'm just simplifying things even a step further. The problem with this method, of course, is that if you've got a really shallow view range, you can see I'm only working with about 100 millimeters here. Problem with that is if I want to show something in the project like furniture, I'm only going to be showing about 100 millimeters worth of that furniture, and it's going to look really strange. So there's another method that I can use to get rid of that back line. So I'm going to just reset the view range here to something deeper. I'll set the bottom back to 0 and the view depth to 0. That's going to bring back a few lines I might not want. One other option is I can go to the Modify tab and use the Linework tool. And this works on a per object basis as well. So I can click on the Linework tool, and in the line style selector I can select Invisible, and then I can click on each one of these mullion lines here and get rid of them. So they're still in the project, of course, but I've just told Revit in this view I don't want them to show. So that's maybe a more versatile way of just kind of limiting what I see on screen here, because if I had furniture in here I wouldn't have clipped it in any sort of strange way. It would still be visible. So with those edits then, I've arrived at a more simplified version of this, and when I go back to my sheet view, I've got much less clutter to deal with here on screen.